Thank you, folks. Thank you for having an audience. That's the surprise at this time of night, so that's great. A few years ago, when running Ireland, I worked very closely with U2. In fact, I had a sort of 20-year relationship with U2, from publisher right through to the record side. And I went on tour with them during the Zooropa tour at one point and had the full kind of run of the rig, and I was shown the incredible infrastructure that was the U2 Zooropa tour. 200 full-time members of staff on the tour. Every day off, according to Paul McGuinness, cost $1 million just to have the day off on that tour. And he said, I was obviously amazed. He showed me the returns from merchandising at one of the U2 gigs at Wembley, where the merchandising return was well over £100,000 just on that one show alone. And again, with my amazement, he said, the problem with you record company people is that you think you are the record industry. He said, you think that U2 is an act that sells records. He says, we're not an act that sells records. We are an act that uses the sale of records to sell our tickets and our merchandising. And it wasn't really until I stopped running Island Records and started working with someone like Paul Oakenfold, who is a real pluralist, who derives his income from records publishing, from touring, from remixing, from producing, from scoring, that I began to realize that the absolute truth of that. But in the meantime, the world has changed and we're in a downturn. We did a little straw poll of everybody here on the panel waiting in the green room, and we realized that in fact our business model has changed somewhat in line with the changes that have happened in management. I'll go back to Paul McGuinness for a second. I think on that album, Zooropa, when that album was launched, he probably came into Island Records perhaps once or maybe twice in the entire worldwide campaign where we sold 11 million albums. And of course, he'd send members of staff in to do little bits and bobs of work, but in reality, the machine worked itself. Nowadays, that system has entirely changed. The record companies simply can't afford to build the structures that we had. I ran a record label that had 120 members of staff that now probably Ireland has no more than 45 members of staff in the UK and is even more successful than the company that I ran. But somebody's doing all the work. As I said in my keynote address, when Alan Levy talked about EMI and the downturn there, somebody's doing the work, and in fact, it's my contention that it is managers that are picking up the slack. We all have to make a living. We all have to change the way that we do things. So I think what I'm going to do is open up to the panel and have everybody explain who they work with and how they work, and also a little bit about the nature of their relationship with them, because the one thing that became clear in the green room is that in fact we are all in slightly different business relationships with our artists from the conventional 20% management commission. Some are, but some are very different. So I think I'll start, Caroline, can I start with you? Is that okay?
Hello, my name's Caroline and I manage David Guetta. I've done so for the past 7 years. Previous to that, I worked at EMI. David is licensed through EMI through France. I manage him for the rest of the world. When I picked him up, he was already a star in France, but his ambition was first and foremost to be a globally recognized DJ and to develop as a recording artist. Over the past 7 years, we've worked very, very closely together. We have worked with the record company, but outside of EMI, to build a global network and fan base of clubbers who are also consumers of his music. And we are now in a situation where he's been made a global priority artist for EMI, and we are looking forward to building the next level of his career. I'm also working with an artist called Jimmy Mystery, who's showing his film tonight. His unique talent is that he's an actor, but he's also a music obsessive. So whereas David's got his recording aspect, Jimmy's got his film aspect, and we will be embarking on a new aspect of his career.
James, if I can move to you now.
Hi, I'm James Grant. I manage a dance act called Above and Beyond. Together we run 2 record labels, Anjuna Beats and Anjuna Deep, and our own publishing company as well. Based in the same building as the guys, there's 3 of them, and the 4 of us are equal partners in the business. We release everything ourselves. We do have some international deals, but we typically release all our records on our own label. We focused historically very heavily on the direct-to-consumer contact and kind of communicating directly with our community. And we were probably one of the first UK record labels to sell downloads direct. We've got a very busy and active web forum. We do a weekly radio show, and we also have a very active YouTube channel.
Eric.
Hi, my name is Eric Hall. I started a management company about 20 years ago. One of the first artists I worked with was Moby. It's 1990. And the company is now grown. There's 8 people working for us. The artists we look after is, aside from Moby, still Roixop, Milo, M83, The Knife, Fever Ray, Clear Up. I'm almost forgetting somebody, I'm pretty sure.
Rex the dog.
Rex the dog, yeah.
This is a man who doesn't sleep.
Yeah. We also have a publishing company where we look after Tiga and Booker Shade. It's very small, but yeah, that's the company. I think it's too boring to talk about all the intricacies. You can ask me about this later.
I'm going to move on to Olga.
My name is Olga Heins. I run a company called Unmanageable Artists. We manage a couple of artists like Roger Sanchez, Layback Luke, Tom Steffen, and a couple of other ones. Spin-offs of the management company has meant that over the last few years we've developed different sides of the business, like Eric, labels, events, publishing, and also a booking agency. The kind of deals that we do with artists really depends on where they are in their career, where they're looking to go, and what that's going to require to take them there.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Ollie Isaacs. I run a company called This Is Music. We're a management company predominantly, but like all the other panelists, we've sort of branched out and started putting out records. I guess you could call that running a record label. The artists we look after range from Simian Mobile Disco, who are moving on to their second album, through to Little Boots, who's about to release her first. American DJ called A-Track, who has worked with Kanye West, but now is really coming into his own, and about to produce his first album. So really, you know, I'm probably like the most junior of the managers here, but even so, you know, kind of developing all the different sort of 360-degree aspects of their careers with them. And for me, it really is about finding out what the artists want to achieve, what do they want to do, and how do we facilitate that. So I sort of see management as a facilitation role.
Lynn, lastly, but not least.
Lynn Cosgrave. I started life as a DJ when I was at college. I learnt on my feet, basically. Loved music. Played it when I was at college, and then took a sabbatical year, told my mum I'm not going back, and carried on working with people and working with other DJs that actually just needed to know how to turn up to a venue at the beginning. Here's a map, here's an invoice. From there, we went and I worked at the Ministry of Sound for 6 years. 3 years with the club, 3 years we started the record label, and you know, developed something special with DJs. I then went on to be the vice president of Sony, into a corporate structure, and I have to say, learned all the way. I just learned how to be a manager, learned how it worked, you know. We did Trust the DJ. We had a massive agency with Cosmac, a lot of DJs, 45 DJs at one point, 80, 90 staff. Again, you learn. All did that, sold some companies, and now we go back to Safe House, which is a few DJs, a small company. I had a child on the way. Big difference, but you know, education, you're learning what's right for your DJ, what's right for your artist. In dance, no acts, I have to say. I've never done big bands, which has actually in the green room become a very big, clear message, which is a very different thing. Managing a DJ, which is a one-to-one situation, to managing a band, which is a 1 to maybe 6 or 7 people, a very different thing. And now I sit here with Safe House.
I think we've spent 6 minutes establishing how great we are and why we're fit to be sitting up here on this panel. But really, I think we need to now get on to defining not recession and the downturn. There's no need to talk about that. I think we need to define what management actually is. And again, it was interesting that talking to people about the date they started managing. Eric, you say 1990. You know, I've been working with managers obviously for 30 years, but I didn't start as a manager until 2000. There are some, like James and Caroline too, who didn't necessarily start until, you know, after things had already started changing. So there are some changes that have happened over the last 15 years that actually are not changes to members of this panel because they started in the new paradigm. I'm interested to hear from Eric because you probably started as a kind of one-man band. I'm not sure. I don't know your history.
Sure.
But I'd be intrigued to hear in 1990 what you had to do as a manager for Moby compared with what you have to do for Moby these days.
Well, in 1990, I don't think they had mobile phones.
They were brick.
And the fax machine was really a big deal there. So I think communication technology somewhat dictated what you were capable of doing. Everything was nice and slow. Well, at that time, I mean, it was a new relationship. I just started as a manager. I was fed up with my previous job and thought, want to be in the music industry. No one gave me a job. I was German in England, so you can figure that one out. It's going nowhere. So I had to persuade people that didn't know any better that I could help them, and Moby was one of them. Luckily, he was naive enough at the time to work with us.
And still is.
Well, now he knows. So we effectively, at the time, I can't even compare it to what I had to do because I learned a lot, he learned a lot, and the industry was totally different. I think it's always, whenever you deal with somebody, you have to look at effectively your bargaining position. And when you deal with a record company, at that time, your bargaining position doesn't exist. You're glad that you get through the door. And at that time, it was still like, ooh, I'm getting signed. Suddenly I have a career kind of thing. And then they do whatever they want to do. At that time, also, record companies, due to politics, they didn't even release half of the records or didn't let you be an artist. All of this has gone now because they can't afford to do that anymore. So to even tell people what the Stone Age was like, I don't know. It's like, I guess we should move on. For me, there's been a big development. Moby's obviously become very successful with Play, and then my company changed completely. Before, it was very much geared on dance artists. I worked with a label called Huge Tunes. We'd signed a lot of records, like we had a record called Café Del Mar, as you probably all know, and we had one of the guys that we worked with remix it, became a huge hit. It was very much dance music at the time that I dealt with, Patrick Prince, Moving Melodies, that kind of stuff. And then after Moby's Play, I got more into artists. I mean, he was always an artist, but it's become a different culture after that. People like Roixop, The Knife, Robin, all these people that I work with now, they're very much artists, not so much coming from the dance music culture where you have a producer making tracks and really being a DJ.
Caroline, you talked a little bit about how within the corporate structure, was it Sony that you worked for originally? EMI. Talk to us about how you interacted with managers in your former role.
I was quite young and so my position wasn't particularly high, but I was head of dance for Virgin Records during the Daft Punk times and the Chemical Brothers times. And I personally didn't have a huge amount of interaction with the artist managers. Occasionally I would see them come in. one exception to that, and he's a man I've learned an awful lot from, was Pedro Winter, who managed Daft Punk at the time and now manages Justice. But from my own experience, now from the outside going in, I am connected to a group of very talented people, but every single thing that happens with David's career comes across my desk. And I see the most important part of my role is I speak to David on a daily basis. I know the way he thinks, I know what he wants, I know the way he wants to communicate with his fans and where his fan base, where they communicate outside of the traditional, just where they communicate. And so it's my job to be the bridge between David and this team of people to make sure that there's a congruent message going from the artist who needs to be the artist. He needs to have the time in the studio. He's on the road constantly. But just to make sure that the bigger this picture gets, that the artist is, that the record company are very closely connected to the artist.
Yeah, okay. And James, you're it's slightly different because you're self-releasing, that's the case? And so in your self-releasing world, are you finding, what skills are you having to bring to the table?
I think, firstly, just explain how we came to this situation. I think around about sort of 2000, the arse sort of fell out of the dance singles market in the UK. And so we couldn't actually sign Above and Beyond as an act. We were trying desperately to sign them to a major because we thought that was the thing to do. And we just couldn't. So we figured actually we may as well put these things out ourselves. And we sort of had a bit of an infrastructure in place already. We'd had about 5 releases on Anjuna Beats at that point. But that was just the road that we ended up going down for that reason. I guess it's all the skills you'd expect of a record label, really. You know, good links to DJs, promotion, web presence, radio plugging. Ended up doing all of those things. I mean, I was just thinking earlier, I can remember going down to the web shop, going down to the post office every day, as recently as probably like 3 or 4 years ago, to post all our sales from the web shop off. So it's kind of moved very rapidly from there.
Yeah.
And I think we've always had that approach where all 4 of us have just been so heavily involved in the day-to-day running.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Where this is leading, and the reason I'm leading it this way, is that it's a fundamental questioning of what a manager actually does these days. It's not, it just simply isn't the way that it used to be. Olga, I'm intrigued to know, you again, did you have a corporate history, or what was your...
Yeah, it's actually a little tied to Lynn. I used to work at Sony Records, and was kind of bored with the corporate structure of that as well. And I had worked with Roger. Similar circumstance. Wasn't that I was so much high level at Sony Records, but it was pretty much Sony had signed all these dance artists at a time where apparently that was the thing to do. They didn't really know what to do with them, so it was pretty much anybody who raised their hands and said, I'll do it. I was based out of the Netherlands, and they were like, well, okay, you can do it. So when I kind of left Sony, Roger asked me to take it on because he had huge problems communicating with a corporate label like Sony Records. And we kind of found that once 1 or 2 people left, like Lynn left the company, it kind of meant there was nobody really in charge of dance music. We've kind of fell into luck when Sony sub-licensed Another Chance to Defected, who made it into a #1 record. But then again, there was no follow-up.